yourself, Saurabh.
Imagine one day when you wake up, something has happened to you. Everything you see seems a bit out of focus. You go rub your eyes, and it's still fuzzy. You go wash your face with water, and it's still not clear. What sort of shenanigans is going on? You'd probably run straight to the doctor. But what if I told you that every day we wake up with this condition? You'd probably tell me to go to see a doctor. But friends, what I'm talking about is not a condition of the eyes, but a condition of the mind. Hello Toastmasters, honored guests. This phenomena that basically clouds our mind and pulls us away from cold hard facts is called cognitive bias. We would like to think that we are rational people. We think and we behave logically, but unfortunately, that's not the truth. Our judgment and our mind is constantly under the influence of cognitive bias. It sways our decision making. It impacts our beliefs. The concept of cognitive bias was first coined by two social scientists, Amon Tversky and Daniel Kahneman. They conducted an experiment where they had participants perform two unrelated activities: spin a number wheel and answer a question. What they found was the number that the wheel landed upon had a direct impact on the answer to the second question. Higher the number on the wheel, the larger the answer to the second question, and vice versa. Now, isn't that a really curious thing? What made the participants make that decision? They were seeing patterns where there were none. Their minds latched on to the first bit of information that they saw on the wheel, and they proceeded to answer based on that. Something's not right here, guys. But their judgment was marred by cognitive bias. So now you might ask me, Saurabh, what can I do to not fall in the trap of cognitive bias? For this, we must firstly understand where this stems from. Cognitive bias usually arises when our brain is trying to save some time and energy. Scientists call these shortcuts that the brain employs as it goes through processing information. They have identified three scenarios where cognitive bias helps us. First one is when there is too much information. When the brain is overwhelmed with information, it tries to look and identify patterns which conforms to its existing system of beliefs and understanding, just so that it can avoid forming new networks. When presented with new ideas, it tries to distill them idea into as few bullet points as possible so that it can remember it easily. This is important because in item number 2, where cognitive bias affects us, is when there is too little information. When too little information is given to us, the brain basically says, okay, I will do my own narration, I will fill up all these gaps with information that I will create by myself. So the generalities that we develop when we are trying to process too much information gets thrown into this context where we have no information. And at the end of it, once we have a complete story, the mind forgets which parts were fabricated and which parts were fact. The shenanigans of the brain. And the third place where cognitive bias helps us or hinders us is trying to make decisions quickly. We all have constraints on time and energy. And to make a decision, we have to have complete faith in what we are doing. Otherwise, we will not be able to take an action. Therefore, the brain essentially makes up a story, tells us this is the truth, and we proceed in that direction. Now that we understand where the three places are that cognitive bias usually sits, what can we do to counter it. The first step that we can do to combat the ills of cognitive bias is to practice deliberate and slow thinking. Just as a master swordsman approaches the cave where the dragon sits in a slow and deliberate fashion, we too must also approach new information in that way. We should give it the rigor and the focus that it needs, and force our lazy brain to work hard for us. The second point to combat cognitive bias is to just stand up and say, look, I do not know. I do not have the information. I am not knowledgeable about this. So a lot of times we are ashamed of saying that we do not know, and we make up as we go along. But we must stop, because that may put yourself and the others at risk. The third place is we must avoid jumping to conclusions. When you read something, when you listen to somebody, we should not straight away jump to like this is the final, this is the fact, this is the final. There's no more truth behind it. We must always think about this, maybe seek alternative opinions, maybe seek alternative sources to challenge your own thoughts. Peer review helps in this a lot because others are able to discern your mistakes and your judgment and your biases more readily than you are. In Dr. Kahneman's book about cognitive bias, Thinking Fast and Slow, he has a quote that is really great and I want to share with you guys. The quote goes, "We all wished we had an alarm or a bell that would ring really loudly every time we were making a serious mistake. But unfortunately, no such bell exists. So we must rely on ourselves and our close networks to save us from the traps of cognitive bias. Therefore, I want to challenge each and every one of you to know yourself, to know your biases, so that you can also wake up with cloud-free and rational mind." Thank you.